Welcome back to the Valicites podcast, the show for accountants, FP&A leaders, controllers, and CFOs who want clarity in financial operations, actionable insights, and bold perspectives to future-proof their finance team. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. Today's guest is someone who's been at the forefront of finance transformation, not just talking about AI in finance, but actively building the future of it. You've heard of him, you've seen him on LinkedIn. Glenn Hopper is the head of AI research and development at Eventus, host of the FP&A Today podcast, and author of AI Mastery for Finance Professionals. He's also a Navy veteran, former CFO, and one of the leading voices pushing back against buzzwords and demanding real substance in the AI revolution. Glenn's mission to turn hype into results and to challenge outdated mindsets in the office of the CFO and to advocate for finance teams that not only understand AI, but build with it. In this episode, we explore what finance leaders get wrong about AI agents, why most tools today aren't agentic, and what real autonomy looks like, the security myths holding back enterprise AI adoption. I can't wait to learn about that one, the role of governance, transparency, and AI workflows, and how finance pros can go from chat prompts to strategic orchestration. As you can tell, this one's packed with insight, depth, and clarity, so we're going to dive right in. Glenn, welcome to the Valicites podcast.
Albert, thanks for having me. I'll tell you, it's weird to be on the other side of the interview, not being the one reading the intro, but thank you for having me on.
Well, don't judge me and don't critique me. I'm a big fan. I couldn't believe that you said yes to this. I'm so honored, and I can't wait to learn so much. I've already been learning a ton from you over the last couple of years. You're up to some great things, and I know the audience is truly going to love this. And again, thank you for your service, sir. We really appreciate what you've done for our country.
Likewise, and right back at you.
My pleasure, sir. Well, let's start it off. I mean, your journey spans from, as I mentioned, military, journalism, CFO roles, and now leading AI in research and development. What led you to the intersection of finance and AI?
The old expression, necessity is the mother of invention. So I guess it started, I worked for PE-backed companies, and I would normally come in like a turnaround mode, and not a lot of resources. But if you're in a private equity-backed company, they expect pretty detailed reporting and modeling, and they live by their models. And without resources, I thought, well, I'm already working, however many hours a week, 60 hours a week, just to try to right the ship at the company. I'm not going to throw another 20 hours a week in building models in Excel when I could find a faster way to do it. So it sort of led me to this like citizen developer, data science role. At some point along the way, I went back to school for analytics, and it seems like it just all kind of merged together with using tech to get better at my job, to do more with less. And I've been a tech geek since I was a kid. So, but it came naturally. And I think by really seeing the power of machine learning kind of early in that phase, I was able to kind of catch the wave early. And I've just sort of steadily built on that. And when I wrote my first book on using AI in finance, no one cared. It was a very niche, small market.
You're crazy.
Yeah. But then once generative AI came around, everybody wants to talk about it. So I love Gen AI. I use it all day, every day. But it's funny. I think that for those of us who've been doing this a while, we still are seeing the benefits of kind of classical AI, machine learning, and what we can do with that. So I don't want to lose sight of what's happening under the hood there and the great things we can do with data and analytics too.
Yeah, I can't wait to peel that back a bit. But what advice do you have for others that are kind of starting to entertain this? And you know what? AI is here. It's here for the good. And I definitely need to navigate with it and learn it in the finance space. You clearly saw a pain point, and specifically for some of your needs to get it done quicker, more precise, right? You're doing 60 plus hours, and we could all relate with that. But now with the technology, clearly you can do it, as you mentioned, your job better. But what advice do you have for others that are still hesitant to lean in here?
So I had a CEO tell me the other day, I work with some people who are excited, running just out on the bleeding edge, and I have to pull the reins back on them and say, slow down. We got to keep a human in the loop. We can't just turn everything over to the bots yet. And then I see the other side of the spectrum. I talked to a CEO the other day who said, how do we know this isn't like the Y2K bug? And I just thought, oh boy, we're
Yeah.
this is you're going to go down as the guy who said rock and roll is a fad.
Right. Right.
So
That's awesome.
we're all dealing with the same thing right now. Aside from the existential crisis of
Mhm.
are the robots going to replace us?
Right.
There's two things that we're all looking at right now, and one is um, fear of missing out. We're hearing about everybody using AI and all these great results, and we don't want to be the laggards here. We don't want to be the Luddites. But then on the flip side of it, for those who haven't been in this for a decade, eh, they're they're worried that they're going to implement AI wrong. And what's going to happen if they don't get this right? If they if they leak data is a big concern that people have, leaking data out to the internet through using these or getting a wrong answer and not checking it and all that. So I, my advice is more of a spectrum than a, take this pill, take the blue
Right.
pill and come on over kind of thing. So it depends. I'm trying to meet people where they are, trying to help them allay their fears, but also maybe instill a little bit of fear in them so that they don't get too far over their skis.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that the advice is throughout the range because I think everyone, to your point, is at a different spot right now. Now, I do think people will catch up. This adoption gap will close with education and all the things. For instance, I saw your recent newsletter, and obviously you're an author too. And I'm like, wow, these types of things really help you understand not only the basics and the foundations, but also for those that are looking to get more advanced. And by the way, 2025 was a big one about agents. And I love your post on LinkedIn about this. It's like, hey, wait a second. Let's stop using this for everything agentic workflows and agents and AI or generative AI. What you've written a lot about this. Walk us through the misuse of the term AI agent and what's the biggest misconception finance teams have right now specific to agents?
Yeah, and I don't, man, I don't, maybe I'm fighting a battle for no reason. My battle is a semantic battle, and
Mhm.
it's I think it's a lifelong conflict with marketers. I don't.
Yeah.
it, it's I. We've talked about agents for years. Those of us geeking out on this a while back, and the big thing with an agent is it has agency. So humans are agents. We can act on our own. We don't need to be prompted to complete a task. And so think of an FP&A analyst. If you have a great FP&A analyst on your team, they know the scheduled tasks they have to do. They take the ad hoc requests and put reports together. And this transformation of data to information into something we can use, this can all be automated. There's so many tools out there that automate this. And the real value, the agency that we have is bringing our domain expertise to it and doing something unprompted and following our own curiosities, following our own paths. And if you call a chatbot that's hooked up to some company documents using RAG, which is great, it can be a very useful tool, but you just ask it questions and it answers, well, that's not an agent. And if you have a workflow automation that's rule based and or maybe even has some LLM in there that is following a set path, that's a really cool thing. We build those for companies every day, but
Right.
it's not an agent. And I guess it matters.
I think it
Andrew
does
Ng,
matter. Yeah,
yeah,
you're right on the money, right? And I think the audience, because we our audience is from beginner, well, one maybe anti for now, who haven't tried it, a little, as you mentioned, fearful. Then on the beginner phase, and then maybe dabbling around, and all the way through even builder on the finance side, right? IT infrastructure and all of that. Can you walk us through generative AI and what you're describing, like a chatbot, or even those that, for instance, OpenAI or Copilot, Microsoft, the GPTs, and then that agentic workflow, right? And typically, and I'm just going to throw out a name that people are familiar with, Zapier. I think some people call it Zapier, and then agents. Can you walk us through just that kind of spectrum of things? Because to your point, I think, and marketers love to do it, right? It's the hype. It's an agent. I'm like, that's not an agent. When you looked at this, wait a second here. Can you walk us through kind of the differences of each one of those stages?
yeah. So let's start with. I guess I'll just wrap up the agent thing and put a pin in that, and then we'll go back to agentic workflows. So agents are, if you've seen OpenAI's operator tool, where if you've ever seen it in action, it looks like RPA. You type in your prompt and you hit enter, and it goes off and navigates the web just like you would. It's figuring out, if you say make dinner reservations, get me tickets for this play, whatever, book me an Uber, whatever you're asking it to do. If it takes this series of instructions and goes and figures out, okay, if the play is at 8 o'clock, we need to be sure that dinner reservation is at 6:30 so that they have time to eat and then get to the play, and it takes X minutes, and it's going through all this thought process where you're not telling it specifically book the reservations at this time and do exactly this. So that would be something that has true agency, but that doesn't work really well right now. There's a lot of points of failure in it, and I think if you hear people like Mark Benioff, and I'm not trying to go to war with Salesforce, and I think they're doing the right thing and they're moving towards the right thing. But let's not. It's like, if we call what we have now AGI, then by the time we get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, it's people are going to be like, I thought we already had this, and I just think it's important to label these things correctly so that we appreciate when there's a change. So that's an agent can go off and do things by itself and doesn't need prompting. And it's like with your good FP&A analysts, it does the things it has to, but then it goes off on its own and it does additional work for us without being prompted. An agentic workflow, these are where we're seeing success every day. And you mentioned Zapier, and there's also like LangGraph and N8N and Make, and there's a bunch of tools out there like this, and these are pretty amazing because to the end user, and this is why I'm like, maybe I just need to let it go, because to an end user, if it seems like an agent to them, is there really any harm in them calling it an agent? And maybe not from a personal user standpoint. I just don't like marketers jacking up their prices for something that's not truly agentic. But so with these workflows, anything that's digital and what isn't digital in 2025, right? So anything that's digital, if you're going from one system to another, there have been APIs for years where you can actually connect them, but they were very specific. You can pass this amount of data you can pass this data from this system, you map one field to the other, and you carry it over, and that's huge in automation. But what these tools allow us to do, and these are all the ones I mentioned, are no-code tools, where you just drag and drop the modules, and anything that people are doing right now that is moving data from one system to another and transforming it in a systematic way, you can put in a workflow, and you can even add AI in these workflows. You can put an AI agent in there that has tools that can refer to memory, that can make decisions, that can route your workflow. And these are amazing right now. And there's so much opportunity for productivity gains around it, and a way that we can minimize these repeatable tasks that are closer on the mindless spectrum than on the mindful kind of work. That is the reason we all went to business school or got degrees in finance or accounting. It's we don't want to be data entry experts. We want to be adding that valuable insight. And these automations allow us to get to that point where we're spending less time cleaning data, moving data, getting it in the right format. And just like with Valicites, what you guys do, let's make it automatic to give you the final report and let you use that human judgment to decide on it.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Thank you for walking us through that. There's a lot of exciting things going on specific to these agentic workflows and even agents. Like, I know we have some big players like Microsoft Dynamics. I know Intuit, supposedly something's coming out, because I've been waiting. I'm like, what's going on with them? Like, they have all this data. I know there's probably some challenges on unraveling some legacy systems. But in your view, and I know you spent a lot of time here, what are some of the things that you're really excited that maybe you're working on now, or that you've seen specific to a use case in the finance function around these agentic systems? What is out there that we're really going to get a lot of value from here soon?
These, going back to the agentic workflows, that is what I am most excited about right now. And taking tasks, it's not just so. A classic example would be an invoice comes in, we use OCR and scan it, we route it, we send it to whatever approvals it needs to. And you could do that with one of these agentic workflows, but also these the SaaS tools that are out there kind of already do this. There may be some decisioning that has a light touch by people, but if you just think of the SaaS revolution, we've already come so far there. And in these rule-based systems that are built and that are deterministic, if that's working, I wouldn't want to replace it with something that is probabilistic and has a little bit of, that's not as defined a path. However, the workflows that have kind of moved up the chain from just processing an invoice and routing it where it needs to be. Think of your variance analysis, your first pass that you do at the end of every month.
Right.
I think about, take the budget, you take the actual, you can have whatever conditional formatting set up to highlight things in your Excel. You can, it's kind of a rote process, but there's more of a value add. So if you could have a program, a rule-based program with no AI in it, you could say, flag any variance that's greater than 5% or $5,000 or whatever granularity you want. You could make that in a rules-based process, but you go through and you look at it and you make a judgment call, and then you'll have to dig into the GL and figure out what it is, and then make a recommendation. It might require more research. It might be a simple explanation. It could be something that you missed, like, oh, we accidentally paid this vendor twice this month, so our COGS went up, or samples like that are not super value add, but they're necessary parts of our job. Well, with AI, if you have an AI system that's tapped into the financial statements and deeper can go into the GL, this variance analysis can be done immediately. So as soon as the month is closed, instead of you going through and doing this manual review, you are getting immediate, here's the first pass of it that already has those notes that you make on the variance or in spots trends, and tells you what to look for, and adds this quantitative and qualitative analysis on there that's done just like a junior analyst would hand you. So you are getting reports that are higher value, and then you can spend your time digging in, finding solutions, and not just reporting, not looking backwards, but actually shifting to, okay, I have this information. I didn't have to take the time to put it together. Now I can move forward. So those are the kinds of automations I'm most excited about building right now.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too, because we all know the time that it takes from closing to your variance analysis, right, to your reporting and then presentation for those that have to present on it or deliver it, and then decision making. And to your point, when you start to minimize the time that it needs to get to that, okay, we know what the variance is and why and what we need to do about it. I mean, decisions are made so much quicker. And I know there's a lot out there. When we close the books and you finally get your P&L, it's like, wait a second, is this even relevant anymore? So then, and that's the old way of doing things. But what you're saying, and we do things similarly at Valicites, but also there's a company out there called Realit. I've been really excited about what they've been up to, and clearly they raised some good money too. But I'm watching, wow, there's definitely disruptors like Glenn and some of the Anna Tiomani and some others at Realit. I mean, it's a really exciting time. I just think. And you do this so well, and I want to do it too. I want to continue to educate, because I think there's so many people out there, audience included here, that are unaware that you're able to do it right now. And you've posted about this. You've said static reporting's dead, right? We have this dynamic type of reporting using some of these workflows or AI. Any thoughts around that, and what you're excited about is what's replacing it, or at least in a specific FP&A function?
Yeah, and really, it's great, Nicholas. So I just talked to him the other day. He's doing some really cool things over there, and it's just a note on building an ERP. I've talked to several of the founders who've started building their own ERPs, and I couldn't imagine a more monumental task to take on. It's like, what?
I would never want to do it. I'm like, wow, this is awesome from scratch. It's great.
Yeah, but even if AI stopped, even if we never got any better at AI than we are right now, there are so many ways to use where we are with technology right now that would improve productivity, I don't know, 5-10 years down the line, if we just hard stop right now, didn't have any more development. So it's like with any tool, when you saw the internet first come around, or when you saw people start to build their own apps for phones. And once the technology goes out to the masses and people find ways to deploy it, there are tools out there that are, again, based just on with the technology where we are today, that will blow our minds in 24 36 months down the road. And this is why VCs going into it so heavy. It's, you're trying to pick the right horses that are going to lead. Look at the dot-com. Of course, there was a bubble and bust, but how many of the largest businesses in the world were started in that boom? So all these investors are seeing right now that we need to pick these winners early and ride that next wave. And it's having being at this point in time, technology wise, at this breakthrough. I'm old, so I've been around for desktop, going from word processors to desktop computers to the AOL and Prodigy, the discs you would receive in the mail, and dial-up internet back in the day,
Oh my goodness, yes.
to broadband internet, to the mobile phone, to cloud computing, all the SaaS revolution. This is, I hate to be the hype man, but honestly, this is bigger than all of those, because it's a fundamental. Those arguably were too, but those were all tools that sort of enhanced what we were able to do. AI, where it is now and where it'll continue to develop, is offloading decisioning. It's a complete shift to the way we've done things. So it's there's so much potential out there, and we've only scratched the surface. I mean, we've only, what was it, November of 22, 23, whenever it was that GPT 3.5 rolled out and caught the world by storm. The acceleration of technology since then has been mind-boggling, and what we've seen already come out of that. Look at how many brand new businesses are out there doing aggressive, amazing things, and they're doing it faster because they're using AI to code. I mean, we are at a 10x speed for any of these technological revolutions that we've seen before.
My mind was blown a couple of weeks ago when I really started to dive into what they're calling vibe coding, right? And there's tools out there like, for instance, a Lovable and website creation, and no longer the days of, and I think there's still value in a web developer and all of that. That's not what I'm saying here. It's more to get your website up and running and to look beautiful, and using a tool, vibe coding with Lovable, from my speech to text. And I'm watching the code roll through. I'm like, this is outstanding. I just remember, because I've done it a couple times now, and the grueling process of building a website sometimes, especially when you want it to be perfect with some other things. And it's so exciting. What do you think? And I love the term that you just used right now, and I'm actually going to steal this. And you talked about offloading decision making. What are some of the risks, though, with that in your opinion?
And so you've heard me talk. I'm one of the biggest evangelists for AI out there, but we're not ready to just toss the keys to the robots and let them take off. I mean, I guess we're doing that with the self-driving cars already, but yeah, Waymo's. I've ridden a couple of Waymos. I trust them. I don't right or wrong.
It isn't bad. Yeah, I loved it.
Versus some of the Uber drivers I've got in a car with. Yeah.
Don't look at your phone. I'm getting nauseous. Like it's one of those drives. All right, got it.
So the dangers around offloading it are, I think about, every time I get asked this question, I think about a public company CFO. Mm-hmm. I think if you're signing off on the financials, are you really just going to take, you may love your team. You may have had your team for 20 years and they do great work, but are you really just going to take what they give you, not even look at it, and just sign off and say, yep, that's good? I wouldn't, and I don't know, maybe there are some out there who would. And if you have a great team, obviously we want to trust the team, but we're human and we're fallible. And our expectation through software in the past, we know how mad we get if our internet goes down for 3.5 minutes. We have this expectation that the software tools that we use are going to be perfect. And it's weird. It's a cognitive shift for us to realize this software can hallucinate. And that would be, I can't, if NetSuite hallucinated, we would be freaking out. But we have to understand how the software works, what it's good at, what it's sometimes good at, and where it can fall into traps and what its limitations are. And that's, I get really pedantic about this, and people shut down when I start talking about this. So apologies to any listeners who are
That's
drifting
good.
off right now. But it's, to me, and I guess I'm pedantic. I think in another life I would have been a university professor full time, not just this side stuff that I do. But I
Yeah.
think it's so important that we understand. I'm not saying we have to become machine learning engineers or software developers. Obviously, with vibe coding, we don't have to become software developers, but understanding the underlying technology, even on a surface level of how's this model working? How is it creating these answers? And I think if you understand just conceptually, I'm not saying you've got to go write gradient descent back propagation calculus problems that, training your own models. I'm not saying that, but understand what it is and how these models are trained and how generative AI is different than classical AI machine learning, and how it understanding how it generates those responses. Because by all accounts, I mean, we've passed the Turing test right now. If you went to a website chatbot and were interacting with it, it would, you might eventually be able to tell. And that MIT paper suggests if you read long form
Yeah.
papers written uh, by bots, then you can definitely tell something just feels off. It's that uncanny valley or whatever. But in these short chat interactions, they seem very human. And if you don't understand how the text is working, it feels like magic. And are you going to trust magic? I mean, are
Yeah.
you going to feel like this thing is conning me or whatever? But if you understand that it's just probability, it's predicting the next word based on everything it's read, and you understand, then you don't make the mistake of thinking, is this thing actually sentient or what is it doing? If you take away the magic part of it, then you can understand how to use it more. And so the biggest fear I have is that we all see the mistakes and the horrible thing it's doing right now, where it can't stop injecting emoticons and M dashes and weird phrasing, like it's not just X, it's Y, and it just does all these things that are just very clearly, like if you had an employee that was doing that, you would tell them to stop, and the LLM doesn't stop, and you would end up writing them up and at some point with it. But it's understanding why it does that and knowing that it's going to change and when to jump in. I don't know. That's kind of a long-winded answer, and
No, I
it's
love it.
more. There's not the specific things that you worry about are hallucinations. Period, and getting an answer that you don't understand. Imagine letting generative AI build your forecast, which it can do. It can do some complex forecasting, and then handing it over to your board or to your CEO, and the CEO asking you about your assumptions and details in the forecast, and you throwing up your hands and
Just,
saying, "I don't know. I threw it in
yeah,
the magic black box."
that is too funny. And you bring up a couple great, a lot of great points there. You're right. I think I actually appreciate this fear of hallucination, and to your point earlier, using operator, even like deep research. I love going in to see how is it thinking, how is it reasoning, like what are the different areas, and what is it navigating through. I was showing someone how to use AI to do some vendor agreement scrubs, and so we were looking for some contact information too, and the names popped up and all that. I'm like, okay, we're good to go. I'm like, wait a second, let's double check these names, because sometimes these names are not in the agreement. And I went through, and to your point, there's still that level of you want to inspect what you expect type of thing. You got to inspect right now. And I'm not saying not to trust AI in a sense, right? But there are those areas of error. Now, I would say, compared to humans from a speed, but also precision and variance, especially in the finance space, a ton better. But there's still that area of opportunity to still have human in the loop. And you opened up that way. And I love that, because I still think that is required, because I don't think any enterprise, and I can't wait. My next question's about this adoption. I don't think any enterprise or C-suite or board is going to say, hey, it was AI's fault. Well, it's AI's fault. Let's move on. Like someone's going to be held accountable, human that is. And you bring up robotics, and I love that you do that, because it truly is. I mean, being built, we see it right around the corner. I always say, and I challenge leaders, hey, you need to start thinking about how you allocate resources or delegate to humans, to AI, and there's obviously an ecosystem there, and robotics. And like anything, if I was working with a robot, I'd like to know, at least fundamentally, or the manual book. I need to read a little bit about it to understand it. Very similar to what you're saying with AI or agentic workflows or agents is, understand the foundations. I'm sure you, I mean, this is super basic, but I was walking through some teachings around OpenAI and just the different models. And this one leader didn't understand or didn't realize that there was the deep research O3, O4, right? And they're all used for different things depending on what task you're up to. Or in this case, they were doing something academic or a dissertation. And so I just, there's so much more to learn and to teach. And obviously, we're glad we have someone like you. But to the adoption piece, sir, what, from your experience, and I know you deal with a lot of corporations and businesses of all sides, what do you think the biggest blockers, aside from the fear of the unknown here, is there anything else that you're seeing that's leading to this, or at least influencing this adoption gap, specifically in finance?
Yeah. So the fear is a big part of it, but there's decision paralysis right now around what I said, fear of getting it wrong and fear of getting left behind. Um, in in that context, I think we've let privacy and security be an unnecessary scapegoat on this. So if you don't really understand how it works and you don't want to take any risks, the fallback position is you can't upload anything into these because you're just putting your PII, your proprietary information, out into the public internet. Why do they think that? The public internet is HTTPS. You've got the encryption that we've had for years. Every software tool. Somebody's maybe running QuickBook Desktop, but even then you can VPN into it or whatever. But we've been putting our data on in the cloud for years. When ChatGPT first rolled out, the default position, because they were trying to get more data, was it would load your data up and use it for training purposes. I've got a whole rant on what happens to that data used for training purposes, but I'll spare that for the classroom unless we want to dive deeper later. But and I think, and actually with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, the default is if you don't go check the right settings, it will use your data for training purposes.
Right.
So, but other than that, these are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. It's data is encrypted in transfer. If you have like ChatGPT Enterprise, you could have a zero retention policy, but because it remembers now that these tools have memories that are local to you, just like your email is local to you. And I mean, it's still on the cloud because everything's on the cloud. But your Microsoft, your Outlook inbox is on the cloud. Your Google Docs are on the cloud. Everything's in the cloud. So this fear of what's happening with your data that you put into an LLM is I think people are using that as a crutch to keep from leaning into it. And I work with defense contractors, and they have very clear guidelines of what they can do with data, but it's not all data. It's the sensitive data. The other data about the company doesn't have to meet the same stringent guidelines. So right now it's just working through letting people understand what's happening with the data and that it's no less trustworthy than your CRM or ERP or anything else that's cloud-based. And beyond that, it's hard to roll something out to everyone when it's not predictable and deterministic, because if you roll out all the nightmares that come with an ERP implementation, everybody goes through the pain. Yeah. But once it's done, it works the same every day, unless there's some bug or something that's a one-off bug fix. And This is scary because everybody's going to use it differently, and it reacts differently to different prompts. And you could give it the same prompt at a different time, and it would go down a different path. And it's because of that unpredictability that just sort of adds to the fear around it. Now, that said, last year, I got a lot of calls for doing training, for doing just high level, basic, what if kind of consulting. This year, though, I'm not even doing any outreach myself. People are coming into me every day, every week, asking about implementations, and it still starts with training, but then it moves into workflows and other ways that we can add value in the company, integrated into our systems beyond just uploading data into ChatGPT and doing stuff with that, but doing meaningful things where we're consistently using AI across the company built into our workflows. So it's slow, but I am seeing the mood around it change a little bit, and I think that it's those two fears. The fear of getting left behind is starting to get higher than the fear of these. And as people use it more and learn more, their initial fears subside a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're right. I think people are starting to educate themselves or reach out to those like you for education and training, and are realizing, wow, this is powerful, and this is pretty dang secure. Now, I do got to ask you, and I'd love to go into your advice for finance leaders, especially with this tension point with the CIOs. Right, it's right up your alley. Too. I'm sure you see it all the time. Right, there's this clear tension point in a lot of cases around security, leakage, ROI. Do we trust it? Right, all of that. What are your thoughts? This throwing a little wrench in here. I've always wondered, when you toggle off, whether it's OpenAI or some others, hey, we don't want you to train your model with our data. Do you think? I always say, I wonder if that's placebo. Like, I wonder if that's really happening. I mean, what benefit? How does that benefit OpenAI for that to occur? Now, I get it. There's you don't want to train the model with your data. Got it. You want to retain all of that. How do you go improve that? How do you make sure that that's happening? Have you run into that at all?
Um, so how do you make sure that there's not a big gaping security hole in your SharePoint? I mean, how do you,
Good point.
when these vendors tell us something, if we're trusting all the company's financial data, if we're in the middle of a top secret M&A deal that nobody can know about, and we're loading our data into a web-based data room, how do we know somebody is not scouring that? I mean, I, again, if unless you're putting all of your data in a Faraday cage that is not connected to any other system, it is in a steel box and buried in a concrete bunker under your house. If it's traveling across a network, it has multiple points of vulnerability.
Mhm.
Um, Now, if you look at the biggest companies in the world out there now, if you look at Meta, blatantly uses your data.
Or Google.
Yeah, Meta blatantly uses your data to serve up to drive your feed and get you in your positive feedback loop. Google
Right.
uses your data to direct ads to you, and look, all the big players out there except for Apple, who says we're locking down your data and we're going to take a different stance than the other companies. And by the way, resultantly, look how far behind Apple is on AI right now. But all the service agreements and what we believe is happening with our data, when we put it anywhere on the internet, um, I I don't know why we would distrust
Hmm.
the AI companies. So Google, if you trust Google to handle your Gmail and your Google
Right.
Drive
Google
and not
Suite.
do anything with your data, yet
That's a good point.
not to do anything there, then and they tell you they're not going to use your data to train the model, why do you believe them on one side? And I feel like it's a construct.
Yeah.
And we could wear our foil hats and put our data in the Faraday cage and bury it in a bunker. But I think that. Oh, and I guess I will add, since I want to go at the risk of being pedantic here, I'll try to make it quick. Um, when so think about these models. The only way to think of it is they've read the entirety of the internet. They've read billions and billions and billions of documents. And so if I go to one of these uh, chat models and I type Michael Jordan is a blank, well, 999 times out of 1,000 it's going to say basketball player. One time out of 1,000 it might say baseball player, because Michael Jordan also played baseball. So
Yeah.
but the model doesn't remember facts. It remembers or it learns probabilities. So if it's not like you or I wouldn't think Michael Jordan, and I need to find a newer reference than than the goat, but but if you or I we're remembering that we wouldn't lead with Michael Jordan is a baseball player
Right.
because it's in our knowledge, but it's not what people memorize him for, but or remember him for. But the predictive chat model doesn't know the difference. So if it came up that time that the probability, maybe they want to know about him being a baseball player. So with all that information, and it knows that about Michael Jordan, because I don't know how many tens of thousands of articles there are about Michael Jordan out there. So it learned probabilities about who that is. You or I, who ChatGPT, OpenAI, Gemini, all these models, they don't know us from Adam. So if I typed in information about me, if I type Glenn Hopper is a blank, it's not going to know who that is, and unless there were 10,000 articles about me or whatever that it was trained on. So if in that I managed to accidentally upload my social security number, my health information, my height, weight, blood pressure, whatever data I'm worried about leaking out there, that goes out one time, what is the probability in all the trillions and trillions of words that it's read that my social security number bubbles up to the top there? And it's just that understanding. And I know that's pedantic, and I know I'm off way deep in the weeds here, but it's
This is
important
good.
to understand as we use these tools. And I'm not saying go upload your, go upload all your information, tell it to train the data. But these fears are misplaced. They're really fears of the technology, but it's an easy scapegoat to say it's of the security and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
It's so
stepping
funny
off
you say
my
that.
now.
That was perfect. It's so funny because I too am less concerned about how we're training the model, especially for those one-off things. I'm more concerned someone grabs my computer and looks at my chat log for that matter. If I'm really concerned about anything, if I was using my social security, it's right there in the chat log. No need to go into the models. Like there it is right there. That's too funny. You brought up Apple. You're right. I don't know, and I don't understand why they're so behind, especially with the cash that they have. But they did come out with that article. What was it, about a month ago?
It was
Now,
immediately discounted by a
okay,
follow-up paper.
I
Yeah.
wanted to chat with you
Yeah.
about that. 'Cause I'm like, I know Glenn read this. I know he's all over this because they really challenged the. Is it AI really reasoning the way
Yeah.
we think, or is it just predictive? Right? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Because it was like, wait a second, Apple, you've been behind. Then you come out with this. Like, are you the one to be talking about this in the study that they released?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's easy, and this is why I'm like, okay, maybe I just need to back off my war against agents. And but it's a semantic thing, and it's the same example that I used with the agent. Now, if a reasoning model actually gives you better results than, and maybe it's a point of clarification, the difference is a non-reasoning model, when it starts generating words. So when you watch it, that's not a construct. When the words come across the screen like somebody's typing at lightning speed, that's because it's generating one word at a time. So that as you get an answer from an LLM, as it spits all that out, it's generating it as it goes, and it doesn't know where it's going when it starts. That's why the old way to trick the models is if you ask it how many R's are in strawberry, it's not thinking like we do. And I think they've, pretty much every model has fixed that now, but
Right.
programmatically, not really in the way that it's learned. But so the reasoning model pauses and thinks or reasons about it before it starts generating the text. And is it reasoning like humans do? No, but it's almost, think of reasoning as fine-tuning the prompt in an iterative way. So
Mhm.
it's taking what you asked it, and it's going through as if it's generating that text the same way as it does when it's outputting to us, but instead of immediately outputting it to us, it's running through a loop internally to refine the prompt and make sure that it's getting what you want. So it's almost like those reasoning models are just AI prompt engineering, and then the outputs are better. It takes however much time it takes to think about it, and then it comes up kind of with the perfect prompt, and it takes a little bit longer, but it comes back with a better output. And I know Apple was questioning the quality of the output,
Right.
and I don't have a massive study on the other side I have my anecdotal information that you do see better responses when you use the reasoning models than when you don't. And there also was a paper. So that paper was the illusion of reasoning, and then the follow-up paper was the illusion of reasoning. And I guess my whole point with that is, if it's, even though it's not reasoning the way that we do, if the result is as if it had reasoned like we do, how much do we really care about how the sausage is made? Now,
Mhm.
if there really were evidence beyond the single Apple paper that said you're not getting better responses from these reasoning models, then that's a waste of compute and something to look into. But as the follow up paper and anecdotal evidence by myself and the other users of reasoning models, it doesn't feel right, and it does feel like Apple making a weird swing because they're behind on the technology.
Yeah, it's almost like, hey, all those first movers, y'all, don't worry about it. What they're doing, it's not really reasoning. Just hold for now. We're on our way. That's the way I saw it. It was too funny. Well, switching gears for finance leaders, you've been a CFO and you spent a lot of time in the finance space and AI. Where we're at today, what would you recommend? Maybe it's tools or even areas of the finance function that finance leaders should really dive in to use AI. Where would you recommend is the maybe the low hanging fruit or even the best ROI for finance leaders and in their space?
So if you're brand new to thinking about using AI, generative AI, for data analysis, I would say the first thing is get your data ready to be ingested into one of these web-based chatbots. There's other, if you're really integrating it in your systems, there's ways you can get around this. You can have it tied straight into your GL and pulling data that way. But I think early on, just like the data privacy and security concerns,
Mhm.
we all heard early on, and rightfully so, LLMs can't do math. So when you hear LLMs can't do math, as a finance and accounting person, done. Don't need it then.
Yeah,
Let sales and marketing use it. Let them,
exactly.
write ad copy and do whatever else they do with it. But for finance and accounting, there's no use. But once these models started being able to write code, well, LLMs aren't good at math, but Python, which the LLMs can write, is very good at math, and it is deterministic. So then it opens up a whole new level of what we can do with these tools. So I would say, for someone who's only thought about this as, yeah, it's a great way to organize my thoughts before I send an email. It's a great way to summarize meeting notes and all this sort of word based areas. Thinking about using this for data analysis. So, back to my earlier point of, if you've got a massive spreadsheet with 15 tabs and a million formulas in it, don't upload that into the LLM. It's just going to confuse it. You want values only, crank it down to a CSV, no formatting, just think, put it in the easiest format for a machine to understand. And once you do that, you can start to analyze and do your variance analysis. Now, if you've just uploaded the, the CSV with no context in it, you're an SMB and it doesn't know your company, it's not going to provide a lot of information.
Sure.
But the more information you give it, the more historical information, and maybe instead of just the financial statements, you have access also to the GL. When it has this larger context, it's just like a person. If you give me a public company financial statement that I don't know anything about, I can go through and do the textbook analysis of it. But if you don't give me any other context, I can't really add value to it. But if you give me that company's 10K and the financial statements, and I go and do research, then I've got a whole lot more context, and I can do valuable things. So I think about using AI that way. Test it out. Test it out if you're still worried about data privacy and all that. Test it out with public company data and deep research to
Oh,
get
that's a good.
more.
I like that. I've
Yeah.
never thought about doing it like that. Yeah, that's a good advice. When you're worried about it, let's use public data and let's test. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're starting to see more of this. We're leaning in, teach us because we want to not only adopt AI, but we're ready to implement. What are some of the things that you've used or that you do or that you advise organizations to do prior to implementation? Yes, there's the education training, but what do they need to do? What are the steps they need to take before saying, okay, let's go, let's invest in this?
we've been talking about digital transformation since what 30 years now, and I think if someone digitally transformed in 1999, good for you. But I don't know. Digital transformation is weird because it feels like a one and done uh, uh, sort of thing, and it's
Mhm.
really it's not because technology keeps moving. So you have to think
Oh,
of it
yeah,
more like a digital evolution. However, I think you work with a lot of companies in the SMB space as well.
that's
It
right.
just they're not like enterprise or even mid-cap companies. They may have a lot of data, but it's more likely to be siloed and nobody's really using it.
Or
And
not used, right, sorry.
probably it's probably there's no data lake or data warehouse. It's just siloed into whatever system, and the ERP doesn't talk to the CRM or to your GL program, and you got your AP and your AR programs. There are all these isolated silos, and like what I just was talking about of giving AI context, the way you're going to see the best results with AI is if it has access to all this data and it has the context. So, step one, before you even start doing any training, any of the other stuff that we talked about, get your data house in order. If you haven't done that yet, it is time now. This is the last call to
Yeah,
to do that. So and it's tough, and it's not the fun work, but it's necessary work. Data is the foundation of these models and what makes them valuable. So if you haven't digitally transformed or digitally evolved, it's beyond time to do it. And that said, even if you started today, sort of okay, we need to connect the systems, we need to come up with a data dictionary, we need to figure out our key KPIs that we're looking at, identify what our sources of truth are. This is all the foundational level. And once you do that, the AI implementations become much easier. And not just using generative AI for the insights, but building increased automations and increasing efficiency at the company. It all relies to understanding the data, tying together the systems, and building that foundation.
I love that. ROI is the big word, especially in the finance space. And as those for those leaders, finance leaders that are looking to invest in AI, have you landed on a handful of KPIs or measurables? And I know there's a case by case basis depending
Yeah.
on the function, the task, but anything high level that you think we should be looking at to say, okay, this was worth. Now we're implementing it correctly and obviously using it correctly. This was worth the dollar. Any areas that you think we really need to laser in on?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one because think about as a CFO, anytime somebody brought a new project to me, that whether it was during budget season or this wasn't budgeted, but we think it's a good project, I didn't want to be the CF no and just shoot everything down, just say,
I love
say, sorry, it's not in the budget, we can't do it. That's not being a good steward of the company's financial position. If there's a good project that has ROI, it's easy to test it and figure out, model it out, and figure out how to do it. On the flip side, something like AI, if you're trying to build ROI on it, it is hard to identify because how do you value data? The, an increased ability to make data-driven decisions. It's
Mhm.
hard to put a value on that. The default and the go-to, and we're seeing it now with massive layoffs, at Microsoft
Yeah,
and
Workday.
yeah.
Hmm.
So the easiest ROI is in reducing headcount, but I don't want to. I think that's a slippery slope of using headcount as R. It can be a part of it,
Yeah,
but efficiency gains. And if you if everybody in your company got a 10%, I mean, a massive 10% efficiency gain would be massive, but even a 2% efficiency gain, that's great. Your productivity is up, but does that mean that people are working 2% less? Are they doing 2% more work?
right.
It's hard to get the tangible idea of the value of it. So if at the same time, though, companies early on getting on the internet, being able to send emails, being able to chat remotely with someone on the other side of the world. It, it was hard to identify the ROI of that back then. But if you were a laggard as the internet came around, or if you were a laggard in switching to using SaaS tools, if you were a laggard to moving, off the desktop and and mainframes and into the cloud, then you were going to get left behind. So maybe this sounds hypocritical for a former CFO, but I think the ROI, while it may be murky right now, the opportunity cost and the potential of not doing this is high enough that the ROI on investing in AI right now, and if we're being honest, for most companies, what does it mean? It doesn't mean I'm building out bespoke systems that are doing, that are costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, that are automating employee tasks. It means getting a chat GPT subscription for everybody in your company, having the team or enterprise
Enterprise, yeah.
tool. That's an expense. I mean, that's
It's
nothing.
minimal.
Yeah, compared
Yeah.
to all the other tools that we use. So I think let's not, just like with security, I think ROI is another one to get hung up on that is just going to slow innovation. And it's, uh, if you're looking for concrete numbers versus the zeitgeist, the feel where everything is going, um, then that's just going to slow you down at this point, because I think it's inarguable that this AI is not going to be the next Y2K. It is. We're
Right.
just in the nascent stages of it, and there's so much room for advancement here that you don't want to miss this ship.
I like the way you position that, though, not just the ROI side of it, right? If we go and invest, here's what happens. But what if we don't? The opportunity cost. Now you're speaking my language. I'm like, wait a second, that's a great way to position it. And I'm even thinking about, going back to the tension point with the CIO, and as you're proposing these things, or maybe those that are proposing it to the CFO, this is what we should do. Here's what we'll get from. Here's what we'll squeeze out. Here's the efficiency gains, et cetera. Here's what happens if we don't do it, right? Here's the opportunity cost. And I think that's a great way to position it. So I appreciate you sharing that. You've had a lot of major voices on your podcast, the FP&A Today podcast. Any themes that keep popping up, or anything that you're excited about? I know you have some things that you'll release in the future, but anything that you're excited about that keeps coming up on the show?
Um, Only the part that I'm driving, that is I'm asking everyone that comes on about how they're using generative AI right now. And the podcast is about FP&A first, but I've argued for years that I think FP&A analysts need to become data scientists, not just. I understand we can use Tableau, great. We can write SQL queries, great. But the same principles that, I mean, we're FP&A people. We're the OG business analysts. So, so if we're using FP&A and we're really just doing everything in Excel or whatever, off the shelf software, then we're not providing all the services we could. But if you have sort of a data science mindset and a data science understanding, it just makes you better at what you're doing. You're looking at data in a different way. You're thinking about um, different ways to look at everything, from your forecasting, the methods that you use for the forecast, to customer segmentation, and all the tools that you use. So I'm driving talk about AI and talk about data, because it is like what I just said about the foundation of AI. I think it's very important. So I don't know, my listeners might be thinking, let's get back to hardcore basic FP&A, but that's kind of where I'm driving the show right now, is on really focusing on data and AI and tech.
Yeah, as I've listened in and tuned in, I've heard the same. And it's funny, the team over at Valisites, we get pumped up about that. And I'm sure they're going to love hearing what you're saying right now, because it truly is. It's, when people ask me, hey, so what's your team made up of? It's actually, a lot of data scientists from Wharton and some others that know finance, but truly their foundation is in that data scientist spot, that true analytics, because that's where things are going. I mean, everything that we build over here, that's where it comes from, right? A lot of developer data scientists, like people in the weeds and understanding these models and all of that. So, and again, are very well knowledge in finance too. And it's crazy how the world has changed and where we're going in that capacity. So I think you're definitely doing us. It's a value add and service that you're combining the two, because it's where we're at and where we're going. So we appreciate that. It's so good. I didn't ask it earlier, and you write a lot about this or post a lot about this, and I really appreciate this, because you are bullish, as you mentioned earlier, about AI, but it's not this rogue, negligent. It's, hey, there's a structured way to do this, to do it securely, and you talk a lot about governance. And I do think those in finance need to spend more time and learning and jumping in here around governance, especially when, again, going back with the to the CIO finance tension, going into that conversation with an understanding of what governance truly means and how to not only grow the business but protect it. I really appreciate that you post a lot about this, or you talk a lot about this. In your thoughts, governance being a non-negotiable, what does that look like practically on the team?
Yeah, I mean, so it's governance and compliance go hand in hand, right?
Mhm.
So we, if you can't tell an auditor when they ask you how you derived a number, I don't know, gave it, the AI did it. So I think about as we move data through the system and as we, everything that falls under data governance and our data dictionaries and our sources of truth and how the data is handled and um, all that rolls into we need explainability around the source data. We need explainability around the models that we use. We need something that is repeatable and scalable. And when the auditor asks, so you can use generative AI, but there are steps that you take where when you get a response that the Python code was written under the hood to use some sort of complex or use profit or use some kind of complex forecasting model, um, don't just copy the results and paste them into a report. You take the graph, you copy the graph in or whatever, you have it output a table, and then you copy the Python code that was used to write it. And as an auditor, in the past, we could hand over Excel documents, and everybody in finance speaks Excel. So the auditor could look at the Excel, click in a cell, see the formula, and say, "Okay, I get it. I understand where this number was created." I don't know many auditors who can read Python code. So, but that is the part that is we're not doing it in Excel. We're doing it in Python, and this is the code that was used to create it. So it all is going to have to shift, but the fundamentals of how we use data of how we use data and um, and track it through our systems and make sure that it's secure and make sure that it's consistent and that we're all using it the same way across the company. I mean that those foundations are the same that they've always been.
Love that. It's so good. Now, I'm sure you get this question a ton, and I've listened in on the show too, and I've seen some of the posts on LinkedIn and the comments, the comments that come to your posts around the CFO's tech stack, the finance tech stack, and I get, I'm sure you have a lot of relationships, but are there any tools? Maybe some are new, some have been around. Anything within the tech stack that you're just excited about that you want to give a shout out on? Like you might want to consider this one or consider that one in your finance tech stack.
It's so funny. Obviously my podcast sponsored by Data Rails, and Data Rails is
Great company.
expanding. They're doing a lot of beyond what we all knew Data Rails as initially, and they've got
Right.
some great stuff rolling out. And I talk to founders all the time. I mean, I talked to Nick Coop from Realit. I talked to Siki Chen from Runway. I talked to Julian Rollins from Cashboard. This is all just in the last week, and there are some uh, amazing tools out there right now. And I say that I'm at, I'm always hesitant to promote one over the other. I think they're all great, but I talk to so many people. I don't want to get the questions of why'd you mention this and not mine.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Sorry to put you on the spot. It's okay.
yeah,
No, but
so
the
I
ones that you
really am
just
at.
mentioned are they're great, especially those founders as well. They're amazing. By the way, shout outs to Vive too, right? Their chief growth officer over at Data Rails. And I don't know who's owning. They still haven't told me because I'll comment on their post. Who's owning the marketing? Because you guys are crushing it with the panda.
With
They're
that
going to bring
panda,
Clippy. They're going to bring Clippy back.
yeah,
I love it. I crack up. I can't wait for the post the picketers, and
yeah,
it's awesome. They're doing a great job. They're doing a great
yeah,
job.
and that is a
Sorry to
V.
put you on the spot, sir. I know you have a lot of relations out there. They're all great. They're all great tools. But any advice on generically, like, hey, when you are in this decision making mode of
Yeah.
what to choose, what's the advice you'd give to those finance leaders around just the steps to take?
Yeah, and I think we're It depends on where people are sort of in their data maturity and their software adoption right now. And I think, again, because I do work with a lot of SMBs, they're not going to go build their own systems. They're kind of at the mercy of when the SaaS tools that they use now, when QuickBooks or Xero or uh, Bill or Tipalti or whatever, whatever tool that they're using, their
Right.
their heaviest use of generative AI is going to be when it's built in those tools. However, if you're waiting for the incumbent companies to roll it out, the wait might be long because they're
Yeah,
worried about any change breaking something or
exactly.
risking hallucination or whatever. That said, uh, there are a lot of companies right now that are natively AI, or because they're smaller, more nimble companies are able to integrate AI much more quickly. I would say it's just like trying to bounce back and forth between the different LLMs. Well, do you like Claude or do you like ChatGPT or do you like Gemini or do you use one for the other? It's just the the time you spend chasing these things is it's impossible to keep up with, and it's kind of like that with software. There's so much software out there right now, but I would say same thing I tell people when they're implementing any new software in their finance tech stack. Don't start with, well, I've subscribed to this software for 2 years, we're under contract, let's put it in, it's going to fix all our problems. Start with, what do you want? Start with those requirements. Don't
Mhm.
just think you're going to upgrade your ERP or change your data reporting system and it's going to solve all your problems. Really start at the fundamental level of, what am I trying to do? And if
Right.
you're a small company or a mid-sized company that has slow close or that doesn't have enough reporting, well, figure out what it is. Well, what is, kind of get down to first principles of that. If I don't have good reporting, what does that mean? What am I lacking? What does good reporting look like? And then once you define that, then you can back into the software. I hate when people lead with software because it's kind of the same way that I hear about AI. It's just sprinkle some AI on it, or just
Yeah. Or
sprinkle
let's
some new
automate.
software on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's similarly, I hear that a lot. We're AI first, we're AI everything. I'm like, I don't think that is going to work out. It's like, tell me what your problems are. What are you
Yeah.
looking for? What are you looking to solve for within your team, your function, or the organization? I love that you said that. It's like, chunk it up, right? It's like that engineer mindset. Chunk it up, and where is that? Where are the inefficiencies? What are we solving for? Then layer in one of these tools that we've been chatting about. And I know I'm biased, but for instance, if your reporting function, right, or cash flow forecasting is a little off or maybe non-existent, typically SMB, it's non-existent when I lift up the hood.
Yeah.
Like, okay, there's a Valisites, or maybe it's your ERP. Yeah, there's a Rillet or what have you, right? Maybe it's QBO or some other ERP or ERP and or QBO for a small size company. But to your point, it's find the pain point. Don't try to over automate, and that's when things start to break. You try to automate everything just for the sake of automating, or AI. You want to AI everything. It's not necessarily going to work out too good in that case. And it's hard to measure too when you're going after 50 different things at one time as well. So, well, any advice for the finance executives that tune in here, that want to lead, not follow, but actually be at the forefront in this AI revolution?
So I've got a whole framework, and you may see it come out in my newsletter here pretty soon. I don't know
I
what
try
this
to
week's
be. I
looking
try
like.
on the newest. I try to be the 100th. I think I
Yeah.
was way too late though. I saw that. I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm going in. But I tune into everything else. I love it.
Um, so first off, I have a framework for rolling out generative AI, and I think just kind of like I said, just throwing the keys to the robot and letting them take off and do their thing is not advisable. Similarly, I would say don't just flip on AI for everybody in the company and say, tell all your employees, fly, be free, do what
Right.
you want, because that's when
Figure
you're
it
gonna.
out.
So there is a framework. There's a smart policy, training, guardrails, the way that you allow the employees to communicate and encourage them to communicate around it and have checks and balances. And then there's all the data retention policies and all that you think of. So that's part of it. But also for leaders, I would say take the time to understand what is going on with AI a little bit under the hood. Look, understand how this is working, because you're expected to be visionary about it. And I know as a leader, as CEO or CFO, you have your day job, but this is, in 5 years, it's not going to be optional. It's going to be fundamental. Understanding AI is going to be like understanding marketing or finance. It's going to be just part of the workplace. So I think that you can make better decisions when you understand what's happening under the hood. And it's like, do I have to be a mechanic to be a Formula One driver? Well, probably not. But when you understand how the car is working and you can hear things that it, you have a better understanding of the engine and what's going on, and can adjust and adapt. And AI is the kind of the same way. So that's really my two pieces of advice is educate yourself, and then come up with a plan for the rollout of generative AI. And then it's going to be one-off pilot projects, experiment, start small, quick wins kind of thing. Just typical agile development,
This was so good. Well, Glenn, by the way, thank you so much. This was outstanding. I can't wait to, typically I'll watch some of what I do here. Sometimes I get a little self-conscious. This one I'm going back and I'm listening to the whole thing. I can't wait to continue to take some great things away from you. I mean, it's such a pleasure to have you on. Where can the audience learn more about you, your book, your newsletter, LinkedIn? Where can we find you, and how can we connect with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place. It's really the only social media platform that I'm active on. And the books, Amazon or wherever your favorite books are sold. And then Substack, yes, subscribe to my newsletter. I just launched it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm putting a lot of thought into these, because it is an avenue for me. I'm very passionate, as you know, Albert, about helping finance people get up to speed on this. And with the newsletter, I'm really trying to not just be more noise in the content generation of everything that's out there, but what is impactful and meaningful directly to finance and accounting leaders, because I think there's so much sort of general noise around it. But in this niche, what do we in our industry, in our profession, need to know?
Well, we'll make sure to put the link in the show notes here. Go subscribe. I subscribed. I did it. I'm on there. I cannot wait. I've been tuning into the podcast. I'm on all your posts. I'm reading all of them, sir. So we appreciate the education, the advice, the recommendations, the watch out for us too. I get a lot of that from you as well. And you also do live shows, webinars. I mean, there's a ton out there. So make sure, if you haven't spent some time with Glenn's content there, please do. There's so much there. It's so relevant and practical. That's what I appreciate about you. It's not hype and the buzzwords. Actually, you challenge the buzzword. It's about, how is this practical? How can you take action today? So we appreciate you for that. It's so good. Well, if you're a finance leader looking to move beyond dashboards into autonomous forecasting, AI-powered decision-making, and strategic clarity, we talked a little bit about it today, but ValSites, make sure to jump in. If you want a free demo, as you can see on the screen here, it's at www.valsites.com. This has been amazing, Glenn. Thank you for jumping on the ValSites podcast. We appreciate you jumping on. Thank you.
So thank you, Albert.
My pleasure. Well, I'm your host, Albert Ramos. And for everyone out there, we will see you next time. Thank you.